What happens when a judge says the government may have ignored a direct court order? That is not just another political headline. That is a legal earthquake. And right now, Trump's world is facing a moment that could turn from courtroom drama into a full-blown constitutional crisis. A federal judge has raised the possibility of criminal contempt, a serious step that can force officials to answer one terrifying question. Who made the decision? Not a slogan, not a rally speech, a name. And here is the part that should make everyone pause. Even the most powerful people in Washington are supposed to obey court orders. So if a judge believes those orders were brushed aside, what happens next? Tonight, we break down 10 reasons this could become Trump's worst nightmare. And reason number the 10th of May be the most politically dangerous of all. Here is the first reason this is such a big deal. This is no longer just about one case, one policy, or one angry headline. This is about something much bigger. Whether the most powerful people in government must obey the courts. And that question is explosive, because in America, a judge's order is not supposed to be optional. It is not a suggestion. It is not something officials can ignore because they dislike it, disagree with it, or think they can win later on appeal. A court order is a command, backed by the authority of the legal system. Think of it like this. If a referee blows the whistle, the players do not get to keep running the play and say, "We'll debate it afterward." The game stops. The rules matter, and in government, those rules protect everyone. That is why this moment is so dangerous for Trump and his administration. If a judge believes officials move forward, despite a direct court order, the story changes instantly. It is no longer just, did the administration make a controversial decision? Now the question becomes, did they defy the court? And that is where the legal nightmare begins. Because once a court starts examining possible defiance, everything becomes more serious. Judges can demand explanations. Lawyers can be forced to answer hard questions. Officials may have to provide sworn statements. And suddenly, the political spin machine does not control the story anymore. The court record does. This is the kind of situation that can shake public trust. Even people who support tough policies may still ask, should any president be allowed to ignore a judge? Now, that may sound like legal language, but the meaning is simple. Contempt happens when a court believes someone may have disobeyed, ignored, or undermined its authority. And when the word criminal is attached to it, the situation becomes much more dangerous. This is not the same as Trump being criticized on television. This is not just another social media fight. This is a judge saying, in effect, there may be enough reason to believe a court order was not followed, and that is a massive shift. Because political arguments can be brushed off, bad headlines can fade, cable news debates can move on by tomorrow morning. But a court order creates a legal record. A judge's finding creates a paper trail. And once the court starts asking whether someone acted with willful disregard, the stakes rise fast. Imagine the scene. Lawyers standing before a judge, every word being recorded, every explanation being tested, every timeline being compared against the facts. There is no cheering crowd in that room, no campaign music, no loyal supporters chanting in the background. Just the judge, the law, and the evidence. That is why this could become Trump's nightmare. Because criminal contempt is about accountability. It asks whether power was used responsibly or whether officials tried to push past the limits. And here's the part that makes this even more intense. Contempt proceedings can lead to deeper questions. Who knew about the order? When did they know? Who decided to move forward anyway? Was it a mistake, confusion, or something more deliberate? Those questions are dangerous because they move the story away from politics and into possible legal consequences. And that is the question no administration wants to hear. In politics, decisions are often described in broad language. People say, the administration decided, or the government moved forward, or officials believe they had authority. But inside a courtroom, vague phrases are not always enough. A judge may want names, timelines, emails, instructions, and sworn explanations. That is where the pressure builds. Because if a court believes its order may have been ignored, It may not be satisfied with general answers. The judge can ask, who knew about the court order? Who received the message? Who approved the action? Who failed to stop it? Suddenly, the story becomes much more personal. This is dangerous for Trump's circle, because legal responsibility can move from a big political brand to individual people. Lawyers, advisors, agency officials, and department leaders may all face uncomfortable questions. And when people are asked to explain themselves under legal pressure, loyalty can get complicated very quickly. Think about it, like a chain of dominoes. At first, everything looks solid. Everyone says the same thing. Everyone stays on message. But once the court starts touching the first domino, asking for facts, documents, and sworn statements, the whole structure can begin to shake. That is why this moment creates so much suspense. The public may see only the headline, but behind the scenes, officials may be asking themselves a frightening question. Could my name end up in this court record? And once that fear enters the room, the political strategy changes. Because campaign speeches cannot erase a signed declaration, talking points cannot rewrite a timeline, and loyalty does not always survive legal exposure. A lot of people think an appeal is like a magic reset button. They believe if a higher court later disagrees with a judge, then everything that happened before simply disappears. But that is not how legal pressure works in the real world. Here is the simple truth. When a judge gives an order, that order usually must be followed unless and until a higher court changes it. You do not get to ignore the order first and argue later. That is why this situation is so serious. Imagine someone gets pulled over a red light and says, I don't agree with this traffic law, so I kept driving. Maybe they challenge the ticket later. Maybe they even win, but in that moment they still had to stop. That is the kind of problem Trump's side may face. If a judge believes the administration acted before the courts could fully review the issue, then the question becomes bigger than whether the policy was legal. The new question is, did officials respect the court while the case was still active? And that is where the damage spreads. Because appeals can take time. Legal arguments can stretch for weeks or months. But headlines move instantly. Public opinion moves instantly. Political opponents move instantly. Once the words court order, defiance, and contempt enter the conversation, they become hard to erase. Even if Trump's team later argues they were right, the image is already powerful. A judge demanding answers, lawyers under pressure, and officials trying to explain why events moved forward despite judicial warnings. In politics, people can change the message. They can go on television, post online, hold a press conference, and say that is not what happened. They can blame the media. They can blame opponents. They can call it unfair. But in court, things work differently. A judge does not just want slogans. A judge wants documents, timelines, orders, emails, sworn statements, and clear answers. And that is where the danger begins. Because once a legal fight moves into this stage, every detail matters. What time was the order issued? Who received it? What did officials know? What did they do next? Did they try to stop the action? Or did they keep moving? Forward, those are not easy questions to spin. Think of it like footprints in wet cement. At first, people may not notice them. But once the cement hardens, those marks are there for everyone to see. That is what a court record can become, a permanent trail of decisions, statements, and actions. And for Trump, this could be especially dangerous because he is known for controlling the narrative. He can dominate headlines. He can turn legal problems into political rallies. He can make supporters focus on his version of events. But a court record does not clap. It does not cheer. It does not care about campaign energy. It just sits there, line by line, showing what was said, what was filed, and what the judge found important. The sixth reason this could become Trump's worst nightmare is because it sends a powerful message. No matter how strong a president looks, the courts could still step in and say, not so fast. That is a part many people miss. A president can sign executive orders. Agencies can move quickly. Officials can announce big plans. Supporters can cheer rallies. But when a policy reaches the courtroom, everything slows down. The judge looks at the law, the Constitution, the evidence, and the limits of government power. And that is where Trump's problem grows. Because this is not just about one judge or one case. It fits into a much bigger pattern of courts examining whether the administration has gone too far. When judges block, question, or challenge government actions, they are not just creating legal delays. They are reminding the country that presidential power has boundaries. That is a direct threat to Trump's political image. Trump often presents himself as someone who can move fast, break through obstacles, and force the system to bend. But a courtroom is one place where speed and confidence are not enough. In court, the government must explain itself. It must share legal authority. It must prove that it followed the rules. And if a judge believes those rules were ignored, the entire image of strength can flip into an image of vulnerability. Think about how dramatic that is. One moment, the administration appears to be in control. The next moment, a judge's order places the whole operation under a microscope. Suddenly, the story is not about power. It is about limits. For Trump, immigration has always been one of his strongest political messages. He talks about border security, deportations, crime, and national protection in a way that energizes his supporters. To many voters, he presents himself as the leader who will take tough action when others hesitate. But here is the problem. Immigration is also one of the areas where the law is extremely sensitive. Why? Because deportation is not just a political talking point. It can change someone's entire life in a matter of hours. A person can be removed from the country, separated from family, sent into dangerous conditions, or lose the chance to present their case. That is why courts pay close attention to due process. The basic idea that people should have a fair chance to be heard before the government takes major action against them. And that is where this situation becomes dangerous for Trump. If a judge believes the administration moved too quickly, ignored warnings, or tried to act before the court could review the case, then the debate shifts. It is no longer only about whether someone supports strong borders. It becomes about whether the government followed the rules while enforcing those borders. That distinction matters. Many Americans may support tough immigration enforcement, but still believe court orders should be respected. They may agree with deporting dangerous people, but still ask, how do we know the right people were targeted? They may want security, but not at the cost of basic legal protections. That is what makes this so politically explosive. Trump's team may try to frame the issue as strength versus weakness, but critics will frame it as power versus accountability. And once the courts get involved, the story becomes harder to control. And that is when things can become very uncomfortable. In public, everyone may sound confident. They may say the same talking points. They may defend the decision. They may insist everything was legal, proper, and justified. But inside a courtroom, confidence is not enough. A judge can demand facts. A judge can ask for names. A judge can require sworn statements. That changes the mood very quickly. Because when legal exposure becomes personal, loyalty can be tested. It is one thing to defend a policy on television. It is another thing to sign your name to a declaration under penalty of war. It is one thing to say, we followed the rules. It is another thing to explain exactly who knew what, when they knew it, and what they did after that. That is the pressure Trump's allies may face. They may have to answer questions like, who received the judge's order? Who passed it along? Who approved the next step? Who decided not to stop? These are not easy questions, especially if the timeline is messy. And here is where the suspense grows. When people feel personally at risk, they may stop thinking only about political loyalty and start thinking about protecting themselves. That does not mean anyone has done something wrong, but it does mean the situation becomes much more serious. The courtroom can create tension inside even the strongest political team. Think of it like a storm moving through a house. At first, everyone says the roof is strong. But when the wind gets louder, people start checking the windows, the doors, and the cracks in the walls. In politics, facts matter. But so does the picture people see in their minds. And when voters hear words like judge, court order, criminal contempt, defiance, and possible arrest, they do not always wait for a long legal explanation. They feel the drama immediately. That is what makes this so damaging. For Trump supporters, this may look like another fight against a system they believe is unfair. But for his critics, it looks like something much darker. A powerful leader pushing against the limits of the law. And for undecided voters, the people in the middle, it may create one simple question. Why is there always chaos? That question can be politically dangerous, because Trump has survived many controversies by turning them into proof that he is being attacked. But this situation has a different feel. A judge is not just a political opponent. On television, a court order is not just an opinion piece. And contempt is not just a bad headline. It sounds official. It sounds serious. It sounds like the legal system itself is raising an alarm. That image can stick. Picture it. News banners flashing across the screen. Commentators talking over each other. Legal experts warning about consequences. And social media exploding with clips, quotes, and dramatic captions. Even people who do not follow every detail may remember the basic impression. Trump's administration is in trouble with a judge. And in modern politics, impressions travel faster than facts. Because in modern politics, the courtroom fight does not stay inside the courtroom. It spreads everywhere. It becomes a headline. It becomes a campaign ad. It becomes a debate question. It becomes a fundraising email. It becomes a viral clip that millions of people see before they even understand the full legal details. And that is exactly why this situation is so explosive. Trump's opponents can use this moment to say, look, this is what happens when power goes unchecked. They can argue that Trump and his administration are not just pushing hard policies, they are pushing against the courts themselves. That message is simple, emotional, and easy for voters to understand. On the other side, Trump supporters may see it very differently. They may say this is another example of judges, lawyers, and political enemies trying to stop him. That could fire up his base and make them feel even more loyal. But here's the problem for Trump. Even if the fight energizes supporters, it can still scare the middle. Independent voters may not follow every legal filing. They may not know every judge's name. But they understand one basic idea. The government should follow court orders. So when they hear words like contempt, defiance, and judge demands answers, it can create doubt. And doubt is politically dangerous. Because elections are often decided by people who are tired of chaos, they may ask, do we really want more legal drama, more court fights, more uncertainty? That is why reason number 10 matters so much. This is not just about what happens in front of a judge. It is about how the story is used outside the courtroom. Once this becomes part of the political battlefield, every new filing, every judge's comment, and every dramatic headline can be turned into ammunition. And for Trump, that may be the real nightmare. Not just losing a legal argument, but watching that legal fight become a weapon against him in the court of public opinion. A judge questioning whether a court order was ignored is serious on its own. But when that question touches Trump's administration, immigration policy, possible criminal contempt, and the balance between the White House and the courts, the stakes become much bigger. Because this is not only about what Trump says, it is not only about what his supporters believe, and it is not only about what his critics want. At the center of this story is a basic question every American should care about: can the government move forward if a court tells it to stop? That question is powerful because court orders are supposed to mean something. If officials can brush them aside, even for a policy they believe is important, then the legal system begins to lose its strength. And once that happens, the damage can spread far beyond one president, one case, or one political party. For Trump, the danger is clear. This situation creates a paper trail, puts allies under pressure, fuels damaging headlines, and gives opponents a political weapon. Even if appeals happen, and even if the legal outcome changes later, the image of a judge demanding answers can be very hard to erase, and that might be the real nightmare. Because in politics, the courtroom is not just a courtroom anymore. It becomes a stage, a battlefield, and sometimes a turning point. So now the question is, do you think this is a true legal crisis, or is it just another political storm surrounding Trump? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this breakdown helpful, Hit like, subscribe, and watch the next video for more clear updates on the biggest legal battles shaking Washington.